over common diagnoses people get. This week, we're talking about disc. So, bulging, herniated, ruptured disc, degenerative disc. That's what we're talking about today. Okay, guys, welcome back to the Body Breakdown. I'm here with Tyler and David.
Hey, hello.
I don't know what accent that was.
Hello.
Give me your best Irish accent on 3. Well, they're here. I don't know where they came from, but they are here today.
In rare form.
In rare form. I'm sure this is going to be very interesting for you guys. But if you didn't get to check out last week, we started off a little small series about medical terminology. So some of the things you're going to hear from doctors, you might get these diagnoses, your friends and family might, but we're just trying to go over common diagnoses people get. Last week we hit on arthritis and bursitis, things like that. So if you've heard any of those or had diagnosis, make sure you go back, listen to that one because we got lots of good information there. But this week we're talking about disc. So bulging, herniated, ruptured disc, degenerative disc, that's what we're talking about today. So if you've ever had one of those diagnosis, make sure you tune in today. Listen to the whole podcast. We have lots of information. And how about we start off? You guys ready?
Yeah, right.
Let's get this rock rolling. That's a weird one. Okay. So let's start off with bulging disc. So what exactly is a bulging disc?
Actually, before we even go into that, I'd say let's even talk about what are the components of a disc so that whenever we start talking about these, people will understand what we're talking about. So a couple of very things that you want to think about. A lot of times when people think of disc, they think it's this. This is actually the vertebrae. So this is a bone. This is where muscles attach. This is where things, it's actually hard structure. There's not a lot of damage that happens here. The damage is it's happening in this little padding that's in between. So this is what the actual disc is right here. So there's 2 components to the disc. This part, and it looks, I got a kind of one that's separated out. It looks like this. So it literally has a small hole on the inside, and it's a very rubbery texture, really. So it's kind of like a tire. Its job is to absorb impact. So that's kind of why it's very rubbery. So that's kind of when it's in between there. It's there to protect the 2 vertebrae from smashing together and getting bone on bone, as people would say, or any of that. That's what this job is to do. But then there's also, on the inside of this, there's a little small circle, and it has a little balloon, water balloon-like substance, like a bubble inside it, which would look just like a real water balloon. This is obviously way bigger, but there's a little bitty version of this inside this disc. So like within that would be like this, and there's a little water sac on the inside of that hole on the inside of that. Does that make sense?
Yep. Make sure you don't squeeze that water balloon too hard.
Or it could be a really cool video.
This is a ruptured disc.
Maybe at the end I'll just smash it over Tyler's head.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea.
Chris would think it's a bad idea with all the audio stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so those are the main factors. Okay, and then the last is, then there's nerve endings. So there's little nerves, as you can even see coming out of this, that are going to be shooting outside of each vertebrae out there. So those are the main things that we're going to look at when we're talking about this.
Okay. So in the case of now that we know what everything looks like, what is a bulging disc going to look like?
So the first one, the definition for a bulging disc is that little water balloon sac that's in here is starting to come out of this little circle and starting to put pressure and damage on this rubber spot here, this rubber, the disc here. So it's going to start bulging out of the disc. Does that make sense there? So it's going to start protruding out of that.
Yep.
That makes sense. Yeah,
I think that's exactly on. And it's like that constant pressure is what's really building up, and it's you being tight for long periods of time or in the same positions causes muscle groups to get tight, which keeps that pressure being applied. And it's like I always like to think about like water erosion. You're not going to wear a rock out with just a little bit of water. It's going to be constant water over a period of time. That's kind of what's happening with really your disc. That constant pressure is starting to deteriorate this outside rubbery connective tissue substance.
Yeah, because it's like, so and this is what we're going to look at today, is why the vertebrae start coming down and applying pressure on those discs. So it's starting to squeeze it. So you're having those vertebrae come down and putting pressure down. Usually at first, it's the rubber's totally fine. It's applying pressure on that little water balloon, and it's making the water balloon, just as a water balloon, you put pressure on it, it's got to go somewhere. It's going somewhere. So it starts coming out like that. So as it's going down like this, it's getting wider. So that's what is happening in this. It starts to widen, and it has to start finding, it's got to find space. So it starts digging in and starting to kind of carve out little spots inside of that.
Yeah.
That's usually not too big of a deal. There's a lot of people that have bulging disc and there's no pain, but that's the first stage of this scenario that's happening.
So what is the purpose of the water balloon in this scenario?
It's just another
suspension.
Yeah.
So it's like
okay.
It'd be like the shocks of a car.
Okay.
It's there to absorb impact, so the disc doesn't wear out.
Yeah. So like this disc is like the tire. Whenever you hit a bump, the rubber can absorb it away, but then the shocks is like the water balloon. So like when you have that extra.
Okay. So the disc protects the bone, and the water balloon protects the disc.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a good way to think about it. Yeah.
Just trying to figure out our line here.
Yeah, and it's a multi-level of protection to create as much cushioning in between these vertebrae.
And there's a lot of people that have bulging discs that don't even realize it. Yeah. You're walking around with it, and it hasn't become problematic yet because it hasn't created so much structural change yet. So whenever people hear the term bulging disc, they're like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. I need to get this fixed. Really, it's the starting phase of you're in the same position for long periods of time. Muscles are starting to get really tight. It's starting to create skeletal change in your body.
You're starting to compress. These vertebrae are starting to come down together, and that's what's happening. It's just starting to apply pressure.
And the component I hear a lot of times is people are always like, well, it's because I'm getting older. My body's starting to fall apart. That's not really true. It's you've been using your body wrong. If you use your body correctly, your discs are totally fine. You don't have problems with it. Whenever you're using your body incorrectly, you create certain muscle groups to get tight. That's what compresses the disc. It's not aging or anything along those lines. It's just time under tension is what creates technically the breakdown. Yeah.
So would you say that bulging disc is kind of like that first step or that gateway into some of the more serious diagnosis like herniated and ruptured?
Yeah. And then a lot of times what people are going to be experiencing during this is a lot of tightness, things along those lines. You're probably going to have some weakness. You're starting to figure out your things that you used to be able to do that were really easy.
You can't move into movements that you're usually, especially in the core. A lot of this is going to be your trunk's not moving. You used to be able to bend down and pick something up, and you don't bend down as easily. You used to be able to turn and rotate, and now you can't rotate as easily. Like these are the symptoms that you're going to start seeing when these start happening.
Okay. Yep. So how does the tightness that creates a bulging disc start to develop?
Just like over time,
whenever you're in doing the same, everybody has their same routine that they do every single day. So like in this case, like if you're sitting for long periods of time, all of these muscle groups that attach here, because everybody's posture is horrible, gets like this.
Yeah.
And then you're stuck like this. All those muscle groups pull these two structures together, so then all of those vertebrae get compressed together. That's really where the bulging cyst starts. Is a lot of people we see it's like usually from sitting for long periods of time. So like almost everybody has a desk job, stuff along those lines. Or on the opposing side, if you're standing up for long periods of time, the muscle groups on the back get really tight. That could also compress it at the same time. So if you're
usually what's happening, it's from all angles are just pulling straight down. So instead of your let's see if I can do this, like being here, they literally smash down. So you can see how my rib cage was up here, down. I'm just like literally just compressing everything, and that's where their normal position is. Instead of being opened up like that, it's compressed down like that. So like that's what's happening. Whenever because I mean we deal with people coming in and all. I look over here at Barry Bones over here, and he's got like this much space in between his pelvis and his ribs. I have a lot of people that I can barely stick my finger when I have them lay down on the table in a position like this. Literally, I can barely stick my finger in between where the pelvis and the rib cage is. That just shows you how tight all their vertebrae are being compressed. Is because there's no spacing in between there. So there should be easily, and that's where they're losing all this elasticity or that cushioning in that disc because all these muscles are just yanking down and pulling this all together.
Okay, so this is why I'm short.
I mean, yeah, if you probably had a longer torso, and you would have you'd gain another like 6 inches there.
That's fantastic. I'm gonna start working on that. So, how do you guys go about fixing a bulging disc? We're reversing the process.
Good news is it's not too bad of a damage yet, so that's the good part of it. So the main thing is we got to release tension. So that's what we're looking at. So some things that would be happening. So like an example could be. You have a muscle, it's called the quadratus lumborum, that's attached here in your rib cage and attached on each of these vertebrae. If you have them on both sides and they're tight on both sides, it can be pulling the whole rib cage and on these vertebrae straight down. So it can be pushing straight down and just applying pressure straight down on the vertebrae. So our job is to release that tension. So I would go in, we would start massaging out those muscles to get those let go, stretching out those muscles so that those muscles are not like just yanking and pulling at that vertebrae the whole entire time.
Yeah. So, and I always like to think about it like if your muscle is supposed to be 8 inches long, but with you on how you're technically doing your, sitting throughout the day, it's only 4 inches long because that's consistently on the state that you have it at. Now you're losing 4 inches, and now all of that pressure is being compressed down. That's what creates the bulging state. Is it literally is compressed for long periods of time, and that water balloon starts wearing out that disc consistently. So what we want to do, take the pressure off. That's how we fix bulging disc. Is find the muscles that are really tight that are causing the problem, get those back to their normal elongated state, get them back to 8 inches, like this is just for example. And then that takes the pressure off within now your disc can go back to its normal state. And a lot of times what happens too, even with the degenerated disc, is that constant pressure, your body replenishes fluid into that water sac every night. So if you are consistently keeping pressure on it, it can't replenish the fluid sometimes. So then that's where it gets worse, and then it starts to work into more deterioration into the disc, which we'll talk about that later.
And is that where hydration even comes into play? Like drinking water consistently too?
Yeah, that's going to be a big part of what we're talking about on the degenerative disc, because that's a big component of it. Another thing I was thinking about with that too is his example of the 8 inches and now it's only 4 inches. Where the real problem comes is when you're sitting and you're in a normal position because you've created it for, is when you need to do something that needs the 8 inches. Now you need that muscle to elongate. You stand your rib cage, you stand up to do a movement and it hits the end of that range of motion and the muscle's not moving, so now it's forcing something else to move. So now it's putting the pressure on those vertebrae and it hits the end of range of motion and it's yanking on those and it's pulling down even harder. So that's kind of where the
I always like to think about it. So if it's supposed to be this long and it can go out to this long, but it's only this long, that muscle is attached to 2 structures. So if you get out to that point, something's got to move. It's not the muscle, because the muscle is locked up. So then what moves is your skeletal structures. And this is what creates, you can, pop something out of place or something along those lines. The SI joint out of place is a common thing. Things along those lines are always what become problems.
Yeah, so that's what's kind of, as you were saying, that's a good point, is because you don't just, not do the things, you find different ways to do it, or you put extra tension on those joints. Like I said, when you go bend down, you feel like, I can't bend down. That's you hitting the inner range of motion of a muscle. And you're going to find a way to still bend down. It's just you're either going to force it and put pressure, or you're going to find a new way to do it. So,
like a rope, not a rubber band. Okay. So let's move on to a herniated disc. So what exactly is that?
Okay. So now back to this. So now that the water balloon is been pushing out, so what happens is now on a herniated disc, it's actually pushing out of the disc. So now it's actually starting to takes the disc, it's putting so much pressure, it starts pushing the disc out. And that's what you can see right here.
That little red spot there?
That little red spot right there is what that is. It's starting to push the disc out of the actual...
where it would be within the vertebrae. Between the 2 vertebrae, it's pushing outside of the vertebrae.
So it should be hidden.
So it should be in there nice and easy.
Now
like
visual.
This, and now it's sticking out. And where the pain comes from, and this back to, none of this is really painful. None of this can be painful until it pushes and puts pressure on one of these nerves. So that's what it'll do. It'll stick out and it'll apply pressure on one of these nerves, and that's where the pain starts coming in. Is the pressure of this disc now applying, almost smashing it against, the other vertebrae or another skeletal structure is what happens.
For sure. Yeah, and a lot of times too, it's like, if you turn it around, where your technically spinal cord goes is right in between these bones. So if you have the pressure coming from this side to the front side of your actual vertebrae, it's going to shoot it out the back, and that's where it's going to actually impinge the spinal cord. That's where you're going to have a lot of problems. So that's a component. And then you also have nerve endings that are also coming out the side. So it could be just as bad, it being pushed out to the side. So, like David was talking about, if this side's really tight and putting pressure on these vertebrae over here, it's going to shoot out that way. So this is where it's really important to figure out the right muscle group. It's because you want to make sure that you're loosening up the right area so it can take the pressure off, so that disc can come back to a normal state.
So just
you use the water balloon.
So I would say, just like on the water balloon, like the first scenario we were looking at, it was just pushing it down like this. Most of the time when this happens, it's going to be on one side or the other. So if you're putting more of the pressure there, it's going to stick. It's going to go out to one side is what it's going to do.
The side that's not as tight is the side that it's going to go towards.
So that would be an example, like say there was muscles, back to saying quadratus laborum, and it's tight on this side but not on this side. And then now these 2 vertebrae are going to start coming together, and it's going to do this on this side and to shoot that vertebrae out on the other side.
So, and it's very common that we'll see where technically people are having pain. It's not actually, it's on the opposing side that's causing the problem. It's actually not that side. So maybe if it's shooting out this side, you're going to be feeling a lot of your pain in this area, but it's actually
coming
what's
from the
causing
opposite.
The problem is the opposite side.
Yeah, just as, I guess even if you want to use this as the problem, most likely on something that lots like this, there's pressure coming from this side. So you would have to fix this, you're going to have to fix this over here. And a lot of times people are just looking, well, my pain's right here, and they're like, okay, well, they're trying to fix something over here. When you can't do anything to that, you gotta get these vertebrae back aligned. These vertebrae are now, this one, say, you know, if we're looking at, say this one's now down to a 1/4 inch, and this one's now increased, this one spreading the pressure down here. Now this is a 1/4 inch, and this is now bigger and shooting out this way. So like we have an imbalance on the going across this. This side is now smaller than that side, and it shoots that out that way. And it hits a nerve. This is the number one thing that's going to happen on this. Yeah.
But it's not to the point where it's not non-fixable.
Yes.
Okay. So it's like it's still you're still at a point you can fix it, but you need to take action immediately. If you do not and you let it progress, it's going to create into to the ruptured disc, which we'll eventually get to. But that's people come in with herniated disc all the time and they totally get fixed.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the so-called water balloon inside of that disc, that can go back to its original place. It has that ability to be more mobile.
So your body will always heal itself if you give it the right environment. So you continually keep that pressure on it, pushing it out, it's going to keep getting worse. So you got to allow that disc to come back to the right spot, and then it can heal itself. So in that, most of the time, it's just because the pressure. It's just shooting out. Like it'll literally, you just put it back, let the disc get back to there. The water balloon would come right back into the positions, and things will start healing back into normalcy.
Now, does the timeline for that normalcy depend on how tight the muscles are?
Yeah, I mean, it's about, when we see it come in, we can see relief and quickly, like we can see, in a couple sessions, see, oh yeah, that's feeling better because we just took the tension off. But it doesn't mean that the muscles are going to stay like that after one time.
And another component is what are you doing on a daily basis? If you're doing the same things that contributed to the problem, and then we work on our stuff, and then you go back to doing those things, it's going to take a lot longer to fix your problem because all the things that you're doing are what's contributed to the problem that's causing it. We do think like you almost have to. It's an equilibrium. Like 5 and 3 are not equal. So if we're doing 3 times on this side the level of work that needs to get done, but you're doing 5 times the opposing work, we're still going to have an imbalance. We're not going to be able to get there. We have to get back to equalization. We have to get those sides.
One of those things would be like even what happened is like maybe someone is doing something where they're at a computer, but they're always reaching over here. They have 2 computers sometimes. That's his, and they're over doing this. So this side gets super tight because they're doing this. So and this side doesn't. So this one is. So if we loosen this side up for you, and we're like, that feels way better. We go back doing the same exact thing. That's going to make the problem happen, and it will take a lot longer to fix.
Or you're going to have to constantly be stretching that side.
Yes, yeah, because you're going to if you sit in that same area shortened for that longer time, you better be going back and stretching the opposing side just as much to keep that balance there again too. Yeah.
Okay. So how do you guys go about fixing this particular issue with a herniated disc?
So the biggest thing is always identify the right muscle group that's actually pulling the skeletal structure off track or causing the pressure that's pushing the disc out, and we have to loosen that up and get it back to its normal elongated state. So everything that we're dealing with here is more so to do with tightnesses, because it's something that's putting pressure that's causing the disc to technically move where it's not supposed to. So we have to find the tight muscle group that's not moving correctly, loosen that up, get it back to its normal elongated state. Yeah, that is the answer.
Yeah, and I guess on this stage, it's usually going to be a one side to the other. It might be a front to back problem, it might be side to side problem. You usually see that there's something sticking out on one side more than the other too. So I think that's kind of usually because it's back to the imbalance of like it's making the vertebrae move side to side type thing. That's where it's getting the pushing it out. So that's what we're really looking for. Is it the psoas on this side that's pulling it down only on this side, but you feel the other psoas and don't feel that bad? Or same thing quadratus lumborum. We're like massaging this one, like, ooh, this one's really bad, and the other side's not. So you're like, okay, there's an imbalance there from side to side. So that's putting pressure and making that vertebrae move one direction or the other if it's that tight. Does that make sense? So then our job is to loosen out that vertebrae and get you starting to your point of get you starting to think about your daily movements and what you're doing every day that's causing the problem. That didn't just randomly pop up one day. So you've been doing something over probably 10, 15, 20 years that this has been building up to. Yeah. So like that's the number one. You got to start kind of almost thinking about your daily movements, daily activities, or what you've been doing that's caused this problem. Because if you figure that out, the process happens faster. You know?
And then the other component is that after that point, once we get the tight muscle group loosened up, we work the opposing muscle group to make sure it stabilizes. So we want to have equal opposing strength on the other side of your doing. So like he was talking about, if you're over here rotated to the right all day long, we're gonna have to start doing things to start rotating to the left to build equal opposing strength to what you're technically doing in your daily life.
So just like a rubber band or a scale, like if something's pulling more this direction into that direction, it's because one side is stronger than the other side. So there's two folds of, yes, we need to loosen it up, mobilize it, get it to where it's not so much tension on it, but he's 100% right. You got to strengthen the other side so that there's a balance there. Because it will automatically, if you don't fix the strength side long term, it'll go poof, and it'll go right back. Because you're back to, it'll always go to the easiest path. You know, if you have a resistance band, it'll always go back to the length that it should be on. So if this one's way tighter, it's naturally always going to fall that way. It's always like, you know, if this side's weak on this side, you're automatically going to naturally lean this way because just holding that is going to be way fatiguing, and that's going to be overly strength. So you're going to naturally keep falling to that direction. So you got to get this side stronger, like he talked about. Yeah.
So if bulging disc is your starting gait, so to speak, or how your disc first starts to get out of position and alignment, and herniated disc would be the next level in severity. How does ruptured disc become a little bit different?
Yeah. So ruptured disc is to the point of no return almost. So this is where things are actually being damaged is what happens. So this is now that little water balloon that's inside here has literally came out of this disc and is almost just leaking out at that point in time is what's happening. The disc is actually ruptured and it's coming out of that. So it's like this so it's still, you see it's still a bubble. It's because now it's gone. The bubble's gone. So the bubble that's on the inside is gone now. It's just starting to leak out of it. And that's what a ruptured disc is. There's no muscle and muscular fix that we can do to fix that. That means there's real damage there. So that's something that you would actually have to most likely get some sort of surgery to come back and repair that disc. So like that's where that level of there's nothing you can do at that point in time. I can take the tension off, but our shock absorber is now gone. So you're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah, and that's where you have to there is always a point of no return where if you don't take action on the bulging disc or the herniated disc, you're going to run yourself into a problem. At that point, you do need surgical intervention to figure out or to repair that disc, repair that water balloon to make sure that you are actually getting like you said, your suspension. It'd be like driving a car without its tire or its suspension. It'd feel horrible. Yeah. So that's kind of exactly like he was saying. You're at a point of no return.
Because on the other ones, the water balloon's still intact. The disc is technically still intact. It's starting to deteriorate and starting to break down. But if you can just release the tension off of it, your body will naturally heal that, and it'll allow the disc to repair. It'll allow the bubble to go, the water balloon to go back into the middle of the disc so that everything can go back to normal. But if you don't do that, that's where it keeps progressing towards.
Kind of like getting your car realigned. Like if you keep on letting it, like it's only off by like 4 or 5 degrees, and you're going to wear that side of the tire out, and those tires aren't going to last as long. So very similar to this, get yourself realigned.
Yeah,
let's get our muscle.
Literally what we're trying to do, just getting everything back in the right spot and tension. It's always about the tension. Like whenever there's a lot of tension, even you feel that sometimes when you have a neck. I just got that tension in my neck. Like that's literally the same concept. You got to get the tension out of that for it to feel better. Same thing's happening. We got to get the tension off of these vertebrae where they're not putting pressure onto the disc. So that's our number one thing we have to think about is you got to make sure you're taking the action on these things before they get to that point.
So don't ignore your check engine light.
Yeah, exactly. That's what your body's there. The pain's there to tell you, hey, there's a problem here. Let's do something about it. But you got to make sure you do the right stuff, and that's where a lot of people.
Oh, well, I tried exercise, but it didn't really work for me. Or I went and did this, and it really didn't help. Well, it's probably because there's 600 different muscle groups in the body. If you don't know them specifically and how to technically work them, you're probably not going to go do it right. So, like, same thing. If you try to go fix your car, but, and nothing about radiators, carburetors, and things along those lines, you're going to be like, I have no idea what the heck I'm doing. And you're probably going to cause it to be worse.
Yeah, you're going to go in there and mess up even worse. Absolutely, yeah.
So that's why we offer 3 free sessions, so you can come in and you get to see what's wrong with your what's wrong with your body and what you need to do about it. So
Okay, so we've talked about bulging, herniated, and ruptured disc. What exactly is degenerative disc disease? How is that different?
So really the only difference of that is this disc is starting to break down. So not in a going out way. It's just starting to lose the rubber. It's almost like it's starting to deteriorate, and that's what disc degeneration is. So the thing we gotta have to make sure it's same cause, similar to the bulging disc, just you had that same stage of tension on it for a really long time. So this is it's a time equation. It's just starting. You're just putting so much pressure on it that it's starting to break down. And a lot of times even they call it a dehydrated disc. So a lot of the times too, this and the water balloon both need water. And, so it needs to be to repair and to just to
replenish.
Replenish. Replenish.
But there's so much pressure on it that that water balloon can't refill because there's constant tension onto it. So if you're trying to refill,
there's not space.
It seeps out. So, and that's kind of what like the degenerative disc, that water balloon's starting to go away because you don't have enough water. There's either constant tension or you're dehydrating yourself, or you don't have enough water where it's not replenishing. Because with how your body works, 80% of it's made out of water. So if you're not drinking water consistently and you don't have enough for your body's main goal is not to technically support your disc. It has a lot more function to utilize water in other areas of the body.
And that's kind of what as your day goes on, all that pressure, it uses that water. The water you at the night when you go to sleep, the job is it refuels that and rehydrates those discs. And if you don't have water, you can't rehydrate those discs. So there's two factors you got to focus on: stay hydrated when you're doing that, and you got to get the tension off. So there's still tension on it all the time, compressing that over and over and over again, just like we talked about with bulging disc. It's not going to fix the problem. To get that, and if you could take the tension off and you provided it water, things can repair. Things can heal at that point in time too. It's just whenever you're not changing those two environments, you're going down the path of making it worse. If you can make it very hydrated, make sure you have plenty of water, and use the tension, things will start going the direction you want them to too.
So does degenerative disc disease happen absent of the bulging disc and the herniated disc, or do they tend to pair with each other?
They can be very similar. Sometimes you can have degenerative disc but never get to the herniation. It's almost like that bulging state. Almost, it's not necessarily. So the bulging is whenever that thing starts coming out of it. It can still be pressing down, and it never actually starts breaking out that way, but it can still start breaking down all of this, the rubbery tissue, the water balloon, and all that. So it's just a different variation of it. So like the herniate is very specific where it's shooting the disc out that way. The bulging, it's this starting to come out. The degenerative is just so much pressure over time that it just slowly starts wear and tearing this or the balloon away.
Okay.
And a lot of times it's like, especially with people that I've seen that have had degenerative disc, it's like everything's tight. So with like bulging and herniated, it's one side's tight. So it's like creating pressure where it's sending pressure out the other way. So you don't have to have as much pressure to start wearing the disc out. I see with degenerative, everything's tight. Everything's compressed, and then those bones are starting to wear out that portion of the disc. Really what's usually commonality.
That tension and it's over time usually too. In fact, on everything we look at, just a little tension here and there is not going to be a big deal. But if you start compounding that amount of tension over
years,
you can't. It's like using the car again. If you hit a bump once, it's not going to be a big deal. It's not going to throw off your alignment. But if you keep hitting that bump over and over and over, that's going to throw that alignment off.
And I always like to look at it. It's either you're tighter, and that's what's causing the problem. You're weaker and can't hold against gravity is another part of the problem. Or you've gained a little bit of weight over the years, and that's what's causing compression. So any of those three things can be contributors to, really any of them.
100%.
So how do you guys go about fixing degenerative disc disease then?
Same thing. We gotta take off the tension and make sure you're drinking water. Like those are the two number one things. We got to say. So that's where he's like, it ain't a specific thing. It's most likely everything in your trunk. We're gonna look at your obliques. We're gonna look at your trunk percentage. We're gonna look at your quadriceps bone. We're gonna look at it all, and we're gonna make sure all of them are moving. So you have the ability to, take, almost decompress yourself naturally. Like you shouldn't have to rely on something to decompress you. It means that something is compressing you. So that's where you need to get those muscles to allow you to not have to, if you just sit up here straight, that you have the ability to allow that everything to decompress, not have something pull you apart. If that makes sense too. Yeah.
And this applies not just to lumbar spine, but thoracic and cervical too.
Anywhere, all the way up to C1, all the way down to the sacrum.
The same exact things happen in the neck all the time. These are exactly the same things. You'll have herniated disc in the neck. Like every single one of these happen every spot in the spine there for sure.
And whether that's the disc, which is all the way up and down. You can see there's some all the way up here. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but there's a disc all the way up there on the skeleton too.
Okay. Is there anything else you guys want to mention about degenerative, bulging, herniated, or ruptured disc?
Do not procrastinate.
Yeah.
Is the number one lesson. The longer people wait, the more it becomes a problem. You're like, it's not that big of a deal today. Well, this is the component of either you need to make sure you're getting into a consistent corrective exercise regimen of what your current routine is, because if you're having problems with bulging or herniated, you're probably overdoing something. And the other component is that you're probably not stretching consistently, you're not exercising consistently, or know what to do, or your current routine that you're doing is causing the problem at the same time.
I like to look at it short-term, long-term. There are some things you can do in the short term that are going to be beneficial. Something that's getting the inflammation away from these things. An injection or
chiropractic.
Well, not even that. I mean more like medications and things like that. Those are all going to be things that are going to be short-term. They'll actually take the inflammation out. But what is the long-term plan? Because if you don't actually take the tension off of that joint, your same problem's going to rise at a little bit down the road. It's going to be a continual problem, and if anything, it's going to keep getting worse. So if you're putting just a Band-Aid on the problem by getting the inflammation there, the inflammation's there to tell you, hey, there's a problem. I'm trying to heal this spot for you. So if you're taking that away, it's not actually a good thing. It can be a way to get through the day, and sometimes on the front end you got to do that because the pain is so bad. But at the long term, you better be thinking of the system of fixing that problem long term, or it's coming right back. I guess is the kind of number one thing I want to make sure you think of. So there's plenty of short-term things, but what is your long-term plan?
Yeah. So for anybody that has bulging, herniated, degenerative disc, maybe not so much ruptured, because at that point it's...
Ruptured, go to your doctor.
Yeah.
And you might not know that, and that's where sometimes going to the doctor, getting the MRI to tell you, all right, is it ruptured, is it herniated, or is it bulging? So I want to give you the tools whenever you go in and have a conversation. Herniated is not necessarily you want surgery yet. Sometimes they do try to have surgery at that level. That's not necessarily what you need to do.
From their standpoint, they see you're probably not going to change your routine, and you're not going to technically change the way that you're sitting, you're doing things at work. So the progression is anybody that goes from herniated always goes to ruptured. So from that standpoint, unless you start doing the right things and get the pressure off, now things can start healing.
So a lot of times that's what their thought is, let's fix it now before it becomes a bigger problem, which is true in that scenario. But that's not the only solution. As long as you can take that tension off of it, that can be. So that's where it's always good to, if you want to go. But I like to give you the understanding, the conversation. Because you're not going to know when they say bulging disc. You're probably going to think, I'm about ready to die. When really bulging disc is not even that big of a deal. Herniated, get more serious, so that'll allow you to understand what the doctor's saying whenever you're having this.
Herniated is your last chance to make a U-turn.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and then if you're at that ruptured, that's the point where they're going to pretty much be like, the surgery is we have to go now type thing, because the longer we wait, the more infections can happen and different things like that.
Yeah, and the big part is a lot of this is to try to not scare you whenever you do hear those terms. Whenever you hear those terms, a lot of people freak out and they're like, I got to do something. And you're right. You need to do something immediately, but you don't need to have surgery yet. You need to make sure you start taking care of your body, actually fixing the problem. Because even whenever you have surgery, those same tight muscle groups that caused the problem
are still going to be tight.
Be there whenever you get out of surgery.
And it might just be a different disc next time.
And it's always a progressive. It always happens. Everybody that's came in has always said the same thing. Like, I've had this one done, and then I had to have this one done, and then I had to have this one done.
So that's actually a good little point too. So that just as how that would even work. So a lot of times, especially if you have a ruptured disc, a lot of it is a fusion is what happens. So they literally will fuse these two bones together so that they can't move, so they can't go side to side or anything like that, to cause any of that disc there. And they'll go in, they'll repair the disc actually too. But if that can't move, this whole spine, actually, let me grab that, Tyler, and just move the spine. So as you can see, this spine should be able to move. That's the whole point of your spine. It has the ability to move. That's why each of these discs are there. It's allow everything to move. Once you start not allowing those to move, then it's going to cause more pressure. So if these discs can't move, now these are going to have to overmove. These are going to have to move even more to get you, because back up, you're going to still have to bend down. You're still going to have to move to the side and do these things. So now your discs are just going to have to be compromised in other ways. And this is what happens is, the same tight muscles are there, so it just becomes this disc is the problem. And it just expands. I mean, I've seen people where they've had literally almost every disc fused over time because they haven't fixed the real problem. They were just putting the Band-Aid up. Oh, let's fix this disc here. Let's fix this. and it just keeps going and going. I mean,
and guess what? Your pain is worse as it goes on. I've never seen anybody that like their pain is 100% completely away after it, like because you're really not fixing the major problem.
Because then, if you have surgery, all those muscles get even tighter because you just cut through them some, or you can't move because like once you have the surgery there, the body is now in healing process. So it's going to turn those muscles off, make them even tighter at that point and weaker. So whenever you're out of the surgery, this problem that you had before that was causing it is now even worse than it was. So this is where now it just keeps on compiling until now it may even turn into a hip issue at that point in time too. We'll see that a lot. Is it starts moving to other joints at the same time.
Because you're compensating your movement.
Yeah. Or that saying, psoas is it's here, but then it's also down here too. So now that muscle's not working that way, and now it can cause hip issue at the same time. So like that, things like that can happen throughout the body because a lot of muscles are moving through more than one joint. So this is where you'll see like, oh, I had a hip issue, and then all of a sudden now it's a knee issue, or I had a back issue, and then move up to a thoracic issue. Like, it's because you're trying to have movement, and these muscles are still not working. So you fixed the stable joint part that it was affecting there, so it can't move there. So now it's gonna affect the other side of the joint that it was all attached. So it can't move on that side. So now the rope is yanking, and now pulling on the other side, and now it's gonna cause a whole other issue too.
Yeah. So for anyone that's received a diagnosis of bulging or herniated or degenerative disc, what is their best way to meet with you guys and figure out what's going on?
I'm in for our 3 free sessions to figure out what's actually causing your problem. And really what we do is figure out exactly what muscle groups are causing your pain, figure out what's immobile, figure out what's really weak, and make sure that we create a plan that's going to get you back to being back to normal again. Get your skeletal structures back into position so you have no pain is our major goal.
Okay, right on. Well, guys, you heard that here. If you want to take us up on the 3 free session offer, make sure you reach out to us. You can always submit or give us a call at 573-279-1997, right?
Bingo.
Want to make sure I have that in my head before I give the complete wrong number to everyone on this podcast. And as always, check out next week because we're going to be going over some more medical terms. So we don't want you to be scared when you go to the doctor. We want to give you as much information as we have to. So listen to next week's podcast. Make sure you go back, listen to last week's, and as always, comment, like, share, subscribe. We want you to hear everything that we have because we're always coming out with new stuff every single week. So until then, we'll see ya.